it just seems like that was stymied for a while, and I do hear of YouTube, a platform like YouTube, really even trying to suppress someone like Jordan Peterson.
It's because he's so famous and the quotes hurt him more. But a very sensitive guy, and he was smart enough to get off of Twitter. Maybe
More often than not, we should be able to have dialogues to get to a point of friction, to get to a point of disagreement and dialogue so we can learn. And so that's the most important thing, because just to have one person up on stage and say, this is law, this is the truth, take it and run with it, that's not truth. Got to get out, get a little change of scenery. I think our minds need to have our eyes work and see things that are moving or different or calming or even stressful too, just to get out of sedentary nature.
Hi, this is Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. In this book, you're going to get to hear about two different groups of former high-performance athletes. One group, which is made up of 90% of the former athletes, does not do physical activity on a regular basis and tends to suffer the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. The other group, which is made up of 10% of the former athletes, is doing physical activity on a regular basis and tends to thrive through the aging process, or at least has a better chance at coping with the aging process. We could have taken these folks to a lab and done all kinds of tests on them. Instead, we slowed them down and sat them down and asked them, in their own words, to describe why they're wired the way they are, so that we all, former athletes and non-athletes, can use some of their inspirational and motivational and mindset lessons in our own lives. I hope you pick up a copy today. You can go to theagingathlete.com. And when you have a chance to read it, I'd love to hear back from you to find out what your thoughts are on the stories of these aging athletes.
hello, folks. This is Sifu Slim, and I am excited to be here today to bring you another conversation with Andy LeSavage. We've got a generation separation thing going on, and it seems to be working well. So we're going to continue with our discourses and hope that you enjoy them and you can take something from that besides entertainment. But if it's just entertainment, we'll be okay with that, won't we, Andy?
Absolutely.
So Andy asked me how I was doing today, and as in our two previous conversations, my response and my feeling is going to be that je suis allumé, I am lit up, and it's grâce à, which means thanks to Mother Nature. And Devereaux Beach was the site of the exploit today, with family and friends visiting. And so some were surfing and some were boogie boarding. And I was so happy on the boogie board today in the 59-degree Pacific Ocean that I want to try surfing maybe as soon as tomorrow. So I'm getting a little excited about the waves. What's up with you and the ocean, Andy?
Aloha, brother. Devereaux is my jam as well. I'll bike out there about once a week and then just get rejuvenated on life and see the waves and view out there. And so I woke up, I got a quick little bike ride in this morning, so it was good to get out and move the legs, and had enough time to set up for this, and then I'm going to go for a hike afterwards. So just another busy day here in Santa Barbara.
All right. So I wrote down something to lead us into the conversation today. What does it mean to be a fair intellectual? Boy, where can you go with something like that? And having come from your college background with political science, I was going to ask you if you can put these three things into percentages in terms of how much time you had to spend back in your four-year degree. So how much of your studies were, I've got three things: memorization, research and creating cohesive arguments, as in research papers, presentations, and video projects. So first memorization, second research and creating arguments. And then the third is a fair-minded sharing and debate. So that could be the professor breaking people into small groups, or in a classroom setting, just sharing your points of view in a discourse, in an open-minded debate. So if you can remember those, I'll go through them. If you can tap into a number of years ago when you were a student, how much of your studies were memorization, you think, if you had to add up the hours?
That's a great question, honestly. And I think it's thinking back, it's been a little while, but most of it would be research. I would say the majority of it's the traditional educational system of, the teacher kind of going out and explaining the larger vision of, the assignment, and then you have the textbook. So most of your times diving into that textbook, or listening to talks, or doing the research. So I'd say more than 60% is the research, and then a little bit more memorization overall than the sharing and debate. But I remember certainly the parts that were more sharing and debate were the things that really triggered my brain. And I think, hopefully most people out there, that's the way we interact and learn the best. For me, at least, I learned by doing, and not just reading necessarily and putting it into practice. Again, having conversations like with yourself, that's what triggers the things in my brain. And so it's taking it off of the written page and getting it out in the world, seeing what's really theory versus real world practice, and how that looks. So I like that question.
Would this work then? Perhaps 60% research and creating cohesive arguments, 30% memorization, and 10% fair-minded sharing and debate?
Exactly.
Okay, that would work for you.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've been tapping into in the education process, the work process, etc., we have Homo sapiens have this winning mindset, and it goes way back to the hunting and gathering people. The person who is the best hunter would gain advantages, and have a higher road to being a leader, higher road to being a chief, perhaps. And so that's, that shows you the competition. That's like an athletic competition. You have to plan out the hunt, you have to listen, you have to follow, the people who came before you. And then once you master that, and you are the Tom Brady of the hunt, your mind, body, and spirit are going to be prepared as well as anyone. And if there's someone else climbing the ranks, like the four quarterbacks that might start out spring training with Tom Brady, he's looking at how he can overachieve. And there's also the competition where you try to perhaps cut the rug out of the other person. So it's unfortunate, but that's how we Homo sapiens, in our survival and competition mode, are pre-programmed. Maybe share your thoughts, Andy, on that statement.
Well, that's an interesting metaphor corollary. I'm a big fan of merging both athletics and intelligence, right? And I think there's so much that you can learn out there on the practice field, and from good coaches. I think that's something that's been helpful my whole life, and to look at people. We all learn from someone that's done it before. And a lot of times the most influential people are the coaches, and those, quarterbacks, or the people that have figured out a system or roadmap that's worked for them. And I think that's one reason that I look for leaders in athletics, intelligence, across the board. It doesn't matter. And so that's where someone like Jordan Peterson really stands out to me, because I can take bits and pieces from his long run of success in psychology and being a professor, and I can integrate those into my thinking, my reading, my learning, and I'll also be a better, stronger athlete and human in the entrepreneurial and work fields because I'm taking those insights and I'm integrating those. And so I actually started a fitness company called profitstrength.com, and on the header of the website is a Jordan Peterson quote. And I think we all can learn from each other, whether it's Tom Brady or these intellectuals, to integrate our view of the world and, you know, figure out those things that are important to us. So for me, a lot of it's about moving forward, finding challenges that you can, you know, get ahead of, and just to look like at Tom Brady and some of the things he's gone through. I don't necessarily put anyone on a pedestal, but someone that's been able to advance and work so hard to get to where they are, there's definitely certain things that I admire from them. And I look at how they're doing their diet, their learning and everything. And I try and integrate that into how I live. So is there someone out there that you really look to learn from like that?
I don't have one individual. I've tapped into Bruce Lee quite a bit on the intellectual, physical, and self-mastery side. And it's what I would say is that in the beginning, I was sad that he passed away at age 32.
Very young.
And then when I started looking into it and I looked at other people who had like a firecracker existence, that they did a lot in a very short time with a kind of an explosiveness to them. His whole life, if you look at his life, was explosive. His first memories as a kid was the Japanese fighter planes flying over his apartment in Hong Kong where he lived with his parents, and he's raising his fist. He knew that they were enemies and he was raising his fist. So that's kind of an explosive youth. And then he didn't know it, and they didn't have an easy way to diagnose things, but he had learning disabilities. He couldn't read. He had dyslexia. And so when people made fun of him with his glasses and his inability to read, he turned to his athletic ability in fighting and used that to settle differences and getting picked on by other people. So I would say explosiveness, even though he was funny and a silly and playful guy, cha-cha champion before he came to America. I think he was 19 when he hit San Francisco. He was born in San Francisco, came back when he was 19. So, playfulness, definitely, but this explosiveness, it was a big part of his life. And then he burnt out at age 32, but he produced so much in that short time that I am less thinking the way I did in the beginning, where I was sad that he left this planet so early.
And it seems like you integrate my favorite quote of his, which is "be like water." It's like the strongest element is fluid, but can be solid at times. And that's where jumping into the ocean and finding your flows integrated into a larger ethos. And Bruce Lee's an impressive guy. It's sad to see some of these people that have great perspectives and ways of being that just go before their time.
So when I opened this about winning in the Homo sapiens, and now I'll advance the discussion. Hear what you have to think, Andy, about this. The senators, congressmen, and Obama had a legal background. We have law school churning out a significant portion of our elected officials. And, the legal background is one of winning. It's of listening to the arguments. It's finding what your client's best argument is, what the weakest is on the other point. It's not about finding the truth, which is what I believe of being a fair intellectual is. The truth can come out in a legal dispute, but you don't win because you've you've just proven the truth. You've won for a variety of reasons, very complicated, but this whole idea about not admitting when you're wrong permeates the legal system, and it permeates government, and it permeates organizations. And I think to be a fair intellectual, you should, and I do this regularly, and sometimes shocks people when I hit them a week later or 2 days later, and I'll call them or I'll see them and I'll say, you know what? I had a good chance to think about some of the things you shared the other day in our discussion. And now I wanted to mention to you that I looked up some things, I thought about them, and I believe you were right on this point and that point. And if I need to apologize for being a little bit too strong, I will apologize. And if it's just honoring that point of view and thanking them for sharing that point of view, which I'm now embracing as a correct point of view, I'll just thank them for that. So tell me what your thoughts are on about this legal education and government, and the ability for grown men who tell their kids to admit when they're wrong and admit when they knocked over something and they blame their sister. And, we tell the kid, did you really do that? I mean, that's the same people in Congress and president are doing that with their kids and grandkids, but we often don't do that as political leaders, admit our wrong and say we're sorry and ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, well, that ties to something that I had written down when I was looking into Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, these intellectuals, which we are going to kind of hopefully keep trying to bring that back to, right? And it goes into the systems. And so I actually had seen, there was the guy who started LinkedIn. He's an entrepreneur, and his name's Reid Hoffman, and he went to Stanford like Sam Harris. And so he had something in his profile that was really striking to me, and they were teaching about systems, and he in his profile said he's a systems thinker. And so I thought, oh wow, that really resonates with me. And so I look at commonalities across genres or categories and try and find commonalities and pull those out. And so maybe it's a thing that I've evolved to pick up signals and be very sensitive to those. But I think there's people that can create systems and utilize the systems to individual benefit or group benefit. And the systems are the most powerful thing. It's like, investment compounding is the major thing that's going to allow you to accrue wealth over time. And so systems have been set up since the dawn of man, and these tribes or groups or labels and delineations of like, okay, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're this, you're that. And so anyway, I dove into the systems education around Stanford, and I've also done trainings where I did a 3-day anti-racism training in Oakland, California. But they talked about how racism's systemic, right? And so most of the education is systemic as well. So we're learning within these systems typically. And education system, then you've got the government, and you've got the bureaucracy. And so I think when you're playing in a system that's been created by humans, there's going to be certain things that benefit groups. And you have a highly litigious society right now, and you have lawyers, and you have media being able to skew things a certain way. So I liked your notion of touching on the truth, and hopefully the truth comes out, but more and more we're finding out that the truth is quite subjective. And I think as long as you have a group, or you're playing in a system where there's some people that have continued to win by using their methods, then they're going to continue to do that, obviously. And so for me, my whole life, I've been trying to study these systems, and the political science has allowed me to understand thinking and the formation of these systems. And sometimes I think way too much about these and just need to cut through and have the dialogue or get to my truth and carry on. But basically, yeah, there's these tools that you can use out there. And I think more often than not, we should be able to have dialogues to get to a point of friction, to get to a point of disagreement and dialogue so we can learn. And so that's the most important thing, because just to have one person up on stage and say, this is law, this is the truth, take it and run with it, that's not truth in the essence of really being in an ecosystem, in an environment that it has to be relational, basically. And I've learned that through my direct experience of, like, I can think I know the truth, but if I'm not getting out there, if I'm not having a conversation with you, if I'm not trying that out in the real world, then that's not really true, is it?
That's some really good points, Andy. Some of the thoughts that you just shared prompted me to remember something I told. I played in the Barrister Softball League in Sacramento, California. And I would say that I have a legal mind, and I get along with these people very well. But when I started to think about what they do, and I heard their stories about what happens in their average day at work and in court, I came up with this funny line, and I said, you attorneys are the sticks that we clients pick up and hit each other with. And so another attorney says, yeah, and that stick only cost you $450 an hour.
Yeah, it's like you have a higher chance of being true for all intents and purposes, or being perceived as right, if you have the money to pay the lawyer to back you up. And that's the way it is, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what position you're in. And it's interesting because, did you see Sam Harris actually pulled his Twitter account? He completely deactivated it as of a couple days ago. Did you see that?
I didn't know that, but I remember listening to him over the last 2 years talking about how much time he was spending on Twitter and how much aggravation the comments that he was reading were giving him, because he has a sensitive side to him that I've always had a sensitive side. His, I would say, is 10 times stronger than mine
Right.
is about what people say about you, and the misquoting him, etc. I maybe it's because he's so famous and the quotes hurt him more, but he's a very sensitive guy, and he was smart enough to get off of Twitter. Maybe you can tell me if he made any statements related to that in the last month, but that's what he was sharing for about 2 years. Too much time, and it was too aggravating for him.
Well, it's a very personal and touchy subject for myself, because I'm very sensitive to, feedback, and please as many people as possible. I'm trying not to be a people pleaser, but certainly when someone comments something or has a completely different view, there's only so much fight you can stand for each individual battle, I guess, and still try and win the war. And so if you're getting bogged down in the weeds on Twitter, that's not a spot where you need to be, I don't think. And so I've personally gotten off of social media for a while, really try and avoid Facebook like the plague, but I do have Twitter. I try and limit the usage there. I try and limit how much time I'm spending there. Don't spend a lot of time being a thought leader on that or anything, but try and use it as a tool to repurpose, articles or things that I'm seeing, and try and share that. But so the interesting timing and topic for me is this cancel culture, which is extremely unhealthy. And I think it seems like there's a tide turning where there's people that have a voice now that had been muted, and the muting is very successfully done because these systems have been put in place. And so if you're not speaking the language of the leaders of these systems, then you're going to get muted, or you're not going to get a platform as nearly as visible or as loud as some of these other people. And so this is really the first conversation I've had on the internet, live streaming to YouTube, where I'm sharing my thoughts freely around something that is kind of political. And I've written a lot about this stuff. I've got a blog and this and that, but I think I've purposely avoided this because there's always going to be someone saying, "Oh, you're wrong," or "This is right," and here's why I think you're an asshole. Whatever that is, I think for me, I've avoided the online conversations, but at this point, it's just I'm ready to put that out there in the world, and whether or not I read the comments or not, we'll see. I don't know. I'd rather have the dialogues with you and really be open to your feedback one to one than have a lot of back and forth as far as analyzing every little point, whether I said this right or that. You
Yeah.
know, do you have a lot of experience with online forums? Do you read a lot of comments? Do you comment on other people's talks, or how does that engagement look on your end?
I avoid doing things that are my own eruptions on other people's YouTube videos. I do comment from time to time, but it would be hopefully sharing something that is simple enough and non-controversial enough to lead people in a right direction. I may disagree with something, but I'm going to do it in a way that's not too long a diatribe. And I will also put my website down there, and and ask people to share their respectful comments based on what I said. So I don't go into rants on a comment section on a video or a blog, but I've written enough in my books that are hard hitting, that are well thought out and highly edited paragraphs and pages, that I think I've done what you're talking about in a in as an in an as an art as in an artful, what am I trying to say, in an as an in an the most artful way I could do it
Yeah.
was in my books. And when I go back and I read them, I don't find too many things that I need to change later on. So I beat them to a pulp for 4 or 5 years before I release them. And I asked lots of people to weigh in, lots of editors to comment, and I had to read them over painfully. My first book, Sedentary Nation, I've read it, I think 110 times. So just imagine
Wow.
how many times. And it was not easy to do that. But now when I read it, it's not a chore. I'll take little pieces from it because I put some good observations and actionable steps in there that I think can help me and help other people.
That's great. Did people have any critical commentary on your books, like The Aging Athlete or anything like that?
Amazingly enough, no negative at all. Very pleased with that. Um, One person who's a psych, uh, psychology and sociology background PhD, and he's got a big following. He commented on Sedentary Nation that I was too against television, and and
Yeah.
he says I use it, but right in the same paragraph he said, but I use it too much, and you're right to tell me to moderate my use of the television. So he wasn't doing enough physical activity. He was doing a lot of TV watching for enjoyment, learning, and to keep him, in my opinion, from doing his physical activity. And my physical activity push is not to turn people into super athletes or make them exhausted. It's to give them this high in mind, body, and spirit, and allow their entire system to function, their brain to function better. And if they don't do it, I guarantee you there's going to be a negative something they turn to, either a substance or a depressed mood or too much TV or internet. Something will come up, and inevitably, invariably. And I would bet 100% if you're physically inactive and you're not like someone who's handicapped and can't move, but you're somebody who could move and you're not doing that for a variety of reasons, you will turn to some dark side, and it will not be good for you. It's just the way of it's not natural.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to face the light and the darkness a little bit. It's interesting. I found myself, there's a lot of people that had the flu going around recently, and I think there is some corollary. I don't know if this is tied to anything we're talking about or not, but the thinking or the lack of movement tied with coughing for me. It's like if I'm not working or moving forward, or if I'm kind of just laying around, it's interesting. I'm wondering if there's a corollary to coughing. The more lazy I am, it's like if I actually just get up and start moving around and start triggering the brain, then I'm not coughing as much.
The the mind body connection is incredible. So I had my back go out, which sometimes happens twice a year, sometimes happens every 2 years, and it was from pulling the starter cord on an electric generator, and I did it. And then I even pulled it when I felt my back was stiff, and boy, did I mess myself up. And I was on the floor on the carpet, which is a good place to be, on a firm carpet, trying to rehabilitate because I wasn't able to walk. Basically, I was really messed up. And finally, I realized it wasn't going away, and it was 4 days in, and I rented a Sprinter van over from Hertz over, and I was living in Oahu, and I had to lean forward, and that was the only way I could relieve pressure on the lower back. The L5 was where my issue was. And I started driving around the island. And so instead of being stuck on the floor in my room,
Yeah.
I was looking out at lava. I was looking at nature, looking at the trees, getting off, climbing out of this van, walking like a disabled person, which I was at the time, and walking to the ocean. And I got grounded and I saw things, and my brain just said, okay, you need your body now, and we're going to release that pain. And in 2 days, the pain had subsided till about maybe a 10% of what the original pain was. And it was a miracle. It's just my opinion, from getting the mind out onto other things and allowing the body to respond to the needs of movement.
Wow. That's perfect. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's something to that. Biking, walking, whatever that is. Got to get out, get a little change of scenery. I think our minds need to have our eyes work and see things that are moving or different or calming or even stressful too, just to get out of sedentary nature. And that's another thing that's something I want to do more research on, as far as the traditional Western medicine way of recovery or dealing with sickness or disease. And being stuck in a hospital with UV light, is that the best way for everyone to recover?
Yeah, it's not a good way to be born. They know that. It's more stressful for all the parties concerned to be in a interior place with everything sterile and everything loud, and the lights have to be this way,
Yeah,
and the stressful situation, hospital, and the more natural childbirths, they've had such great results out of that. Then the argument, of course, would be, what if there's a problem? That's a very good argument. If you're in someone's home and there's a hemorrhage or something, you've got to get to the hospital. So, all these things need to be taken into account. But there was lots of death during childbirth before modern times. So that's one of the great benefits of modern medicine, is the whole situation around not having deaths and very few deaths in childbirth.
absolutely. Yeah, modern medicine's great, but there's also those photos of back in the day. They used to have hospitals outside. Did you see those? During COVID, I saw a couple photos where it was old school hospital rooms that were just outside in nature, so the patients could get sunshine and fresh air. And I just thought that was an amazing thing. If we could find some sort of convergence between that and what we have now, that would be great.
Andy, on the fair intellectual side, I have a couple of bullet points I wrote down. I
Yeah,
want to run you through a couple of things and then bring it back to Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, and see if we can make some observations about that. So we all have different points of view. And sometimes we're married to those points of view and we'll fight to the death for those points of view. We're caught up with winning. I mentioned that the Homo sapien caught up with winning. We're also caught up and on staying with our own status quo. So it's not just the status quo out there. We're perpetually interested and programmed to stay with our own status quo. And you mentioned being a systems thinker. So the cancel culture, I jotted down two things related to that when you were speaking. I call it a symptom and a reaction that is an eruption of discontent. So I think there are a lot of people out there in the world right now, they're not discontent. If you had a 40-year career, as many of our parents and grandparents did, they may have had other reasons of discontent, but it wasn't the idea of not having stability. If you had a 40-year career, you had fear along the way, perhaps, and you may have had sickness and other issues, financial issues. You may have been laid off a few times during that period. There's lots of reasons for discontent, but you didn't have this idea of people not having work if they had a 30 or 40-year career. So an eruption of discontent, and then I also wrote down an eruption of disruption. So if you're not happy, you want to, sow the seeds of discord, and you want to make other people unhappy. And the people who are in this cancel culture may not think they're doing that, may not agree with me, but I think there's an element of that they want to disrupt the status quo, and they want to matter. They want to get themselves out there. And I'm not saying it's all negative, the cancel. I'm not going to say that, but there is a significant part of this that's just out there to create this disruption. And maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe something good. Maybe the Sam Harris's and Jordan Petersons will rise and get some of these canceled people to open their eyes, open their mind, open their heart, and join in some new vein of being a fair intellectual and advancing a philosophy that's a helpful philosophy. I think there are many negatives in the world, and maybe some of the people, that energy in the cancel community, will come out and they will right some wrongs and open some doors and create more fairness and more integration and cooperation. So I'll ask you to weigh in on some of those things, Andy.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. You've got the Jordan Petersons and then the Sam Harris's. I did dive into Christopher Hitchens a little bit. He wasn't as engaging as these two guys for me, and it was just a little bland for me. But nonetheless, I like anyone that can really pull together a succinct thought around something that might be very intangible. And, whether it's the point of religion or consciousness or, intelligence, these guys they are admirable because they're going out there and they're forming a belief around something that is, it can be subjective, but it's also highly polarizing a lot of the time, and a lot of people have not had a chance to meditate on it to the extent that they have. One reason I really like Jordan Peterson is because he's gone through the trial and error a little bit more than someone like Sam Harris, who went to Stanford, went to UCLA for his PhD. His mom was, a producer for the Golden Girls, and he's very much a creation of media, and having the ability to meditate and think really in depth on a lot of things in theory. Jordan Peterson, for me, he's someone that he's a little bit rough and tumble. He grew up and he talks about his childhood and drinking in Canada and the jobs that he's had. And for me, he just strikes a chord that these other intellectuals or academics might not. And so to find insights into the Bible or God or these things that we'll probably never have a concrete answer for, depending on who you are. But, for me, there's a lot of things that are going to always be up for debate in society, hopefully. And he has such a articulate way, an impactful way of speaking about these things. I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts of why someone like Jordan Peterson's not more popular in the United States, Sifu?
I thought, Andy, that he had gained so much traction over the last 5 years that he was one of the top. They used to call it media darlings, and I guess you would call him one of the top media darlings. But he's also, well, I guess the internet is the new medium. He's one of the top five, I would guess, internet darlings that people are following and people are buying his book. So if you know something different than that, please share, because I didn't know that.
Well, it just seems like it's been many years where, for all intents and purposes, he should, in my opinion, be on the level of a Elon Musk as far as notoriety, publicity, the things he's putting out there, to, like you say, lead the people in the right direction.
Mhm.
It just seems like that was stymied for a while, and I do hear of YouTube, a platform like YouTube, really even trying to suppress someone like Jordan Peterson. For me, that's troublesome. And yes, he's got millions of views, but there's been points in which he's saying, hey, I screenshotted this and I was at 12 million views a month ago. That can't be right. And so there's something a little bit fishy for me as far
Yeah.
as that goes. But then you have someone that is like a Elon or Sam Harris, and they're able to step in to any conversation, any room, and have a platform and visibility at this next level. And
Take us through, Andy, some of your thoughts. You may have watched some of those debates between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris more than once. Each time I watch it, I gain something new, and I have sometimes a drastically different feeling about portions of it, and it's fascinating to me. Two men sitting in their own easy chairs with a good moderator and a big audience, how deep they could go, and how articulate everything went, and how fair it was. It really was. It got heated a few times, but because Sam doesn't, he's not the type of person to get up out of his chair or to throw something. He's very level-headed. Um, those two did such a wonderful job, and left each time probably liking and appreciating the other individual more than that at the start. What are your thoughts on some of that, Andy?
I think it's an art form to be so, I guess, to be like a Jordan Peterson or Sam Harris, to have the thoughts that they do, the cognitive power that they have, right? And once they get going on something, you can tell they can go and go and go and go. The power for them to actually learn and listen and be able to transition, be like water, right? And they can go down, they can be so firm about this belief on God. They can go to whatever degree that they need to talk about this, but then to have that wherewithal to listen to the moderator, to be able to make those audibles like a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers in the quarterbacks, right? So it's like, for me, that is the intellectual strength and rigor that they have, is to be able to be so tied to their belief and their depth of learning and understanding of a particular topic, but being able to defend it, but then also being willing to have a conversation around that, to dance around you poking holes in my argument and vice versa. There's a dance to it. It's like a tennis game or a pickleball game, where it's just the back and forth is what makes it good and what polishes any of their thoughts, I think, at a certain point. And that's the beauty of the internet and these platforms, is none of our thoughts, no matter who you are completely 100% polished and accurate until you get it out there, and then you learn, oh well, this resonates in this way, and you can tell a lot of the best thought leaders are coming from a point of, they've meditated on it, they've thought deeply on it, they've written books on it, and they're still willing to hear the opposing side or where someone might think they're weak in that. And for me, that's very important. That's something I'm trying to work on myself, is just having a feedback loop, right? So it's interesting. How do you typically challenge your thoughts on something that's as deep as, divinity or sex, Sifu? How does that really, how are you learning from these guys, and how are you getting feedback in your regular life?
So being a good listener and ferming notre bouche, closing our mouths, after we've had like an interaction with a group of people and we're with a person driving home, we can listen to that person. And I get that regularly, from a dear friend. And we go to events, and this person may say, hey, did you remember when you said this and how it affected that person? Maybe you could try this next time. So it's a constant learning experience. We talked in a previous conversation about being a peaceful warrior. So I think both are important. I think debate is important. Intellectually fair debate is very important. So I'll give you an example. I was at a Thanksgiving event 2 days ago, and we both, everybody there, was well into their third glass of wine, and I'm a lightweight, so it was about halfway into my first glass that I was, coming to the point of huggy and high-fiving. I was very, very happy. As you know, I work a lot and I do a lot of physical activity, and it's fun to go out and be amongst our fellow Homo sapien human creatures and just celebrate Thanksgiving. So the owner of the home where we were having this Thanksgiving is a different person, of course, than I am, and somebody brought up abortion. So
That's a rough topic to have over wine and with strangers.
Yeah. And so I brought up maybe 2.5 minutes worth of information that were observations and history on abortion. And my main point is that the wealthy people will always be able to fly wherever they need to fly to go get their abortion. And it's the people who don't have those means or time, or they have too many job and family responsibilities, they can't do that. So they're the ones stuck by the law. And that, to me, is not fair. And the Supreme Court is made up of very affluent 70 and 80-year-old people who it's very unlikely that they're going to need abortions. And maybe they're not worried about their kids and grandkids because they always have the money. I would guess that more than 80% of those people on there have grandkids going to private school. So it's a different type of scenario when you're asking highly affluent and educated people who go to have fancy homes, cars, and fly on private jets to weigh in on a law that affects everyone, not just poor people, it affects everyone. And I happen to look up after this conversation how many pregnancies end in abortion. Take a guess what the internet led me to on that. What percentage of all pregnancies end in abortion?
Oh gosh. Would it be recently?
Recent 2021. And you have to
75%.
remember, there's different abortions. There's pills. I don't know what, maybe there's injections, but there's other ways besides the very invasive type of
I guess it's pretty high.
39% is the statistic I found. So are they trying to change people's lifestyle by enacting a law? And I'm not saying that abortion's good or bad. I'm not going to even broach that one. That's a long discussion. But just to be fair with the law, here's 39% of all pregnancies end in some sort of pre-birth termination, and now they're passing a law that's going to, has the potential, with all the states who join in this, has the potential to change completely the lives of people. And many people have had 3 and 5 abortions, and maybe more. Drug addicts would probably be pretty high in that category of many abortions.
Yeah. Well, that seems to play into the systems in my mind. I don't know a lot about the abortion. I try and stay away as much as I can from that sort of thing and respect, individual people's choices, but without a doubt, what's happening too is the bureaucracies and the systems, and what's happening is, there is a disparity of people who are able to access certain things, and that's one of them. That's one of the most important things too. So yeah, these topics are very fascinating, and I'm always interested to learn more about how people think about religion, sex, and divinity and free will. That's one thing that I think is really an important thing that needs to be talked a lot more about is free will, and how do we exert free will in a society, and society that needs certain limitations on certain people to allow people to be free. And so have you heard any thought leader talk in depth about free will? Is there a certain point or perspective that you like?
There's so many on free will, but I'll tell you a humorous one, and you weren't done by Christopher Hitchens in a positive way, but you might take a look at his talk at Google. He does a really good job in about 35 to 40 minutes of summing up his point on his being an anti-theist and an atheist at Google, where they're very informed, very high-thinking people who've come from all over the world to be at Google. And that was probably done in 2006 or 7, maybe even later. But take a look at that talk and
I did
see what you
watch
think.
that talk. And
You
what's
did?
interesting, yeah. Well, what's interesting is I came from a Silicon Valley background in the last decade, and software and technology, and very familiar with the tech entrepreneurs and the Googleites. And I fought with every bone in my body not to be a Googler or a Facebooker, because those people are brilliant for all intents and purposes, amazingly intelligent, much more intelligent than I am. But in my mind, that system that's been created it's an interesting notion. You have someone like Christopher Hitchens going to Google, which is really a big campus. If you go to some of these Silicon Valley company headquarters, it's a strange hamster wheel of sorts, where it's kind of sad for me to see Silicon Valley, because it's been created in a way that's just a structure for capitalism, right? Like Oracle or Google, you've got people living their entire lives to just work on this campus, and they think they're free, they think they're having good jobs, and they do for all intents and purposes, but they're on this hamster wheel, and they're on this campus where they work there, and they're kind of tied in every way, shape, or form to this job. And for me, that's not super fulfilling. So
I have 5 steps in becoming a fair intellectual, and I'll see what you think about these. I'll do a very quick one on this. Honest realization: what you grew up with may not be true or helpful, and that I would include religion in that question. Number 2, have fun with the process of learning and debating. Number 3, challenge your philosophy, read opposing points of view, have conversations with smart people of opposing points of view. Number 4, write your philosophy down, see how it stands up. Ask others, especially more experienced people, to comment on it. 5, sleep on your new gems of wisdom that were brought up in conversations. See what the morning holds and allow things to marinate. So let me hear your thoughts on any of that.
I am a big believer in writing things down, because I think we all have a lot of thoughts that we might think are true or that we believe in, but if we don't really write them out, then they're not being fully sussed out. And I even learned from an entrepreneur he created this system that I liked a lot, where you put out your goals in life for your 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, and lifetime. And so you put that out there into a chart. I've actually got it as a free download on LeSavage.com. And you create your timeline of what you want to accomplish, and then you print it out, and then you sign your name to it. And for me, for a while there, I was really working on being accountable to myself, because I've got all these goals and dreams, and I think a lot about all these different topics. But until I write about it, I'm not really putting it into more of a concrete form. I'm not able to poke holes in it for theory and logic. I'm not able to share it to the extent I would. And that's where I think, again, the internet's so powerful. If you even have a blog or you just start writing, it's amazing what will happen out there. And putting it out onto the internet, having these discussions, that is a really, it's a mystical form of putting your thought into that next level, into the consciousness of what's out there. So I think that's very important for anyone that wants to evolve their thinking.
Andy, the idea about the generation gap, have you done much reading or thinking on that notion?
Our generation gap, or
not you and me, but the generation gap that left your probably grandfathers and great uncles in a different zone than the people born in the late 50s through 60s, the baby boomers, as I was. My thought is that it came from the education process and the opportunity towards education that happened when the World War II veterans came home and had the GI Bill. So if they came from a farm or a family of moderate income, they had the ability now to go to college. And when they could take classes on biology and evolution and archaeology, and they could prove that there were so many holes in the religious doctrines and teachings that they were given, that created this generation gap, whereas their parents would have said, this good old religion, our pastor's our friend, our church is ourselves, our savior in our community. That's where we have our weddings and gatherings. So that separation happened also with me, because my dad, even though he wasn't in World War II, he was born right at the beginning of the Depression. And even though he got college educated, he didn't go on this path of East-West philosophy as I did, being enamored with parts of Jim Morrison's life and the Beatles' life and transcendental meditation, these types of things. That those were opportunities that I shunned at first because of my upbringing, but then I got into them and wanted to take a look at the other side of things than my conservative, church-going, hardworking, Puritan work ethic background. And I'm forever grateful that I was enabled to have that path. So that's the generation gap in the 20th century that I think makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's definitely profound. And I think everyone goes through the generational learnings, and we all have certain restrictions or resources given to us, right? And so there's always going to be the framework of religion. What religion were your parents? Were they not religious? And I think we all kind of fight, or we go along. I mean, you can either say, I'm going to go into the stream of what my father was, or I'm going to fight what my father was because I hated him, and I'm going to learn this and this. And if my dad was super religious, I'm going to not be religious. Or if, like he was Republican, I'm going to be Democrat. And so I've benefited from being the younger brother in the family. And so my older brother is very similar to my father. And so seeing just certain strategies or ways of being where, if your dad's super argumentative, then you're not going to want to argue with anybody, right? And or if, you just pick the good things and you try and integrate those. There's always going to be the larger issues or battles or journeys that we all go on to learn about our own, sexuality, our own divinity. What does that mean in relation to other people as well, right? So I think the religion structure is infinitely complex. It's kind of like a labyrinth, and you can be in the labyrinth, whether it's Catholicism, Judaism, Buddhism. For me, it's about learning the tools that allow you to feel most in alignment with yourself and the higher being, if you will. And so, that's where, meditation's great, and breathing exercises. For me, working out and being in communion with people is a great experience. And so I think it's very important to have the conversations to figure out what that means to you, what the right labels are for you in relation to what works and what feels right. And so I think that's the most important thing, that if I had any thesis, it would be to remain open-minded as much as possible, to learn from everyone, to learn from different thought leaders, athletes, religions, and form your own way of being and thinking that allows you to be as healthy and helpful as possible.
Very good points. Did you have to leave at 12?
Yeah, I've got to meet up with some friends and hopefully get them back onto the road to recovery with some fresh air and some movement. So
Perfect. Yeah, let's touch base over the next week and see if there is another conversation that we should dive into. I did write some things down about Hitchens versus Rush Limbaugh, and there's many things we can do. We could do a discussion of the thought leaders. That would be a fun one, and what our points of view on some of these people.
I think you and I could certainly talk easily for an hour around more depth as far as particular thought leaders and topics that they're touching on. And this is a great conversation. So thank you, Sifu.
Very good. I was even more subdued today than I normally am, in my opinion, but maybe I wasn't. But it's a fun conversation. It's fun to interact with Andy LeSavage and the viewers at large. And remind us your website, and then I'll share mine, and then we can sign off.
Yeah, you can find most everything at www.lesavage.com. That's LESAVAGE. And that's where I have a lot of my stuff. So check that out.
And I'm Sifu Slim at sifuslim.com, author of a number of books, and someone who loves these types of conversations. And if anyone has a good interview guest, please go to my website, sifuslim.com, and you could plug me in through the contact form with any references, referrals you have about that person. And we will sign off. So be all that you can be, brother.